Maseches Nedarim Daf Tzadi contains one Mishnah, which divides the daf into two sugyas. The first half of the daf is discussing the concept of being mefer or matir in neder, which is not chal yet. It's dependent on the Tanai, and until the Tanai happens, the neder doesn't happen. Can you be mefer or matir until that point? We've already seen a machlokis about whether or not you can be mefer. Now the Gemara has three opinions, whether there is a machlokis or not, as to whether or not you can be matir. The Gemara will bring a proof conclusively to one of those three approaches. Next, we'll get to the Mishnah, which will discuss three cases in which a woman is separated from her husband and receives her ksuba. She can force her husband to divorce her, and the Gemara will discuss how that affects truma, if Ashes Kohen is ne'enas. So let's begin. The Gemara has already said there's a machlokes between Rabbi Nassan and the Chachamim about the halacha of being meifir neder, which is dependent on the time, which hasn't happened yet, so it's not chal yet. We've already seen that Rabbi Nassan said you can't be meifir until it's chal, and the Chacham said no, you could be meifir the neder even though it didn't take effect yet, even though it's dependent on the time which we're waiting to happen. Now the question is, what about being matir neder, where you have a Chacham that's being matir neder instead of a husband or father being meifir? Do you have the same machlokes or not? So the Gemara has already quoted that Rav Acha bar Rav Huna apparently felt that you do have to wait for the neder to be chal. He had a case where somebody made a neder and it was a tanai, and he disguised it. He made him fulfill the tanai in order for the neder to be chal, and only then he disguised him and he took him to go get a heter for that neder. Now, Rava had said that he is correct, and the reason why he said that is because you have the same machlokes you have about whether you could be meifir if the neder is not chal. You also have about whether you could be matir if the neder is not chal. And the opinion of Rabbi Nassan would still say you cannot be matir until it's chal. Now the Gemara quotes of Papi, who says no, there is no machlokes in the case. As far as being matir, there everybody agrees that you can't be matir unless it's chal. Meaning to say that the Chachamim agreed to Rabbi Nassan, you can't be matir unless it's chal. Now the Gemara is going to quote later on a third opinion, which is another version of Rav Papi. It's something that Ravina said that Marimar told him that his father had said in the name of Rav Papi, that everyone agrees to the Chachamim that you could be matir, that in the case of matir, everybody agrees to what would have been the opinion of the Chachamim, that you could be matir even though the neder was not chal. Now, the Gemara brings a raya. So the Gemara first brought one raya which the Gemara rejects. The Gemara brings it twice, once before we bring in the third opinion when you only have the first two opinions, and then the Gemara brings it again when we have the third opinion. So the raya is, you have a brisa that says if somebody makes a neder, and he says, I aser hana on a certain individual, and then he says that if I go and I matir neder, I get a heter from a chacham, I'm asering hana on that chacham. So the neder asering hana on the chacham is a neder which is not chal yet. It doesn't take effect until he actually goes and he's matir neder by that chacham. So that would be our shaila. So the Mishnah there paskins that he first gets a heter, that he gets a heter on the first one and then he gets a heter on the second one. So Gemara says you see clearly that he has to wait until he gets a heter for the first one to go be matir neder on the second one, because you first have to wait for it to be chal on the second one, that is the chacham who gives him the heter, before he could actually go be matir the neder that he made asering hana from that chacham. So the Gemara says there's a clear proof that there is at least that it's a clear proof. The Gemara says that you have to wait until the neder is chal, which is the opinion of Rabbi Nassan. You still see that. You say that by heter. So the Gemara says that would seem to support the opinion of Rav Papi, that you don't want to say that it's only Rabbi Nassan who are saying like here. So therefore you would say that the Chachamim agree to Rabbi Nassan that you have to wait by heter until the neder is chal. So the Gemara rejects this right away. The Gemara says you don't know which one's first. He calls him the first one. The second one, you know which one he's doing first. So why should you assume the first one and the second one means the neder he made on the person and the neder made on the chacham afterwards? You don't know which one's which. You just, the first one and the second one could be the one that is going to be matir first and the one he's going to be matir second. It's not clear from this. So therefore brings a different case where it is clear. Somebody makes a neder, he makes an iser hana on a certain individual, and then he says that if I'm matir that neder, then I become a nazir. So now you clearly can tell which is first and which is the second one. The first one is an Isser Hano Neder, and the second one is a Nazirus Neder. And if there it says first he has to be Shoel on the Neder of Isser Hano, only then could it be Shoel on the Nazirus. So you see, clearly he has to wait for it to be Chal. So the Gemara can't get out of that, but the Gemara says you still don't see a proof from here that everybody agrees about Hatara, that you have to wait until it's Chal. It could be that this is the opinion of Rabbi Nosson. We would rather have said that this is the Chachamim, and the Chachamim agreed to Rabbi Nosson about Hatara, which would support Rav Papi's position, that there is no Machlokes, and everybody agrees to Rabbi Nosson that you have to wait until it's Chal. However, it's not a solid proof. It could be that this brisa just happens to be written by Rabbi Nosson. However, the third opinion, that of Ravina quoting, who's quoting Mareimar in the name of his father, saying that if there everybody agrees to the opinion of the Chachamim, that you don't have to wait, you matter neder right away by Hatara. Here you clearly see that that's not true, because there's at least one opinion that says that you do have to be matter, that clearly says you do have to wait. You have to first make sure the neder schal before you could be matir it, and that's why you first have to be matir the Isser Hana before you could be matir the Nazirus. So that is a tiyufta, that is a kasha on that opinion, which is rejected. Now I'll begin the next Mishnah, which discusses 3 scenarios in which a woman could force a husband to divorce her and give her a ksuba. It's not her fault that she needs to exit the marriage. And there's a first version and a later version of this halacha. There's a Mishnah Rishona and a Mishnah Acharona where we changed, and we said that there was problems being created, and therefore we changed the halacha here. So the 3 cases are, number 1, where she says to her husband, I am tameh to you, meaning I am aser to you. The Gemara explains that means she was married to a kohen, and she says she was raped. The halacha is that a woman who is nenas is only aser to her husband if he was a kohen. It's not her fault, of course. Nothing she could have done about it. Therefore, he has to divorce her and give her a ksuba. She's aser to him. Second case is where she says, heaven should testify between me and you. The Gemara explains that means that his zera does not come out like a chait, it doesn't fly like an arrow, which means that he cannot have children. Again, that's called between him and her because there's no one who could possibly know that besides for the 2 of them, but she has a right to demand a divorce in a case like that. And the third case is where she makes a neder and she says, I am Netulim and Yehudim, something we saw quoted many times, which means that she is usher to have, she's making a neder, that she's usher to have hana as tashmish from anyone. And that's clear that the reason is because it's extremely painful for her, and has nothing to do with her husband, has nothing to do with a lie that she's making up. She's answering all tashmish from all people on herself, and therefore she must be honestly, severely pained by it, and therefore we allow her to leave the marriage and keep her ksuba. And this is how things work first, and then the Mishnah says there's a problem, that there are women who are trying to get out of the marriage because they had taken a fancy to someone else. So they would use one of these 3 excuses to get out of the marriage, go travel somewhere else, and then go marry this other guy. And therefore they decided to make it that these 3 situations did not allow women to escape the marriage, did not allow her to force her husband to give her a divorce. And instead we did as follows. If she said, I'm usher to you, so she had to prove it. We didn't take her word for it, we didn't believe her, she had to prove it. If she said that the zera is not yarakachetz, so then we do everything in our power to request the husband to divorce her, and of course, if it's true what she's saying, then he'll agree. However, we don't force it. And if she says she has an Isser Hana, so then he's just mayfair the Isser Hana of Tashmish as pertains to him, and she remains Asr Bahana to everyone else. Okay. So now the Gemara begins. The Gemara asks Shaila, can she eat truma? In our first case, where she says that she is also to her husband because she was nenas and she's an ishes kohen, is she allowed to eat truma? Is she only allowed to stay married to him because we don't believe her? That means we don't believe her as far as the halacha of marriage to someone else, but she still becomes also the kahuna and therefore also to eat truma, which is a separate halacha. Or do we say no? If we're rejecting the halacha, we're not believing her that she was an enas, and therefore she's not believed at all, and she's allowed to continue eating truma. So Rav Sheshes says she's allowed to eat truma, and the reason is because if she wasn't allowed to, people would assume that she must really have been an enas, and then she really is after the kahanim, and they will consider her children to be asurim. They'll be chalalim from henceforth, and that'll mess up her children going forward, and therefore we can't have a situation where she's not eating truma. Rava says no, she doesn't have to eat truma. There's other things she could eat. She's not stuck as far as truma goes. She could eat other things. Plenty of other food to eat. And there's no reason why she should eat truma if she doesn't have to. There's no extenuating circumstances here. Now the Gemara says that Rava says that Rav Sheshes would agree if she gets widowed, now she can't continue eating truma anymore. even though a widow of a Kohen is allowed to continue eating truma. Here, because she was nenas and she's also to kahuna, she should not continue eating truma. And you don't have a concern here anymore. Says Rav Sheshis will agree that people will be motzilas on their children because they'll assume this was another oinus situation that happened after she was widowed and has nothing to do with the children that she already had from before, and there won't be any problem. So Rav Sheshis would agree in that situation. All right, now the Gemara says, Rav Papa says that we were tested by Rava. Rava tested us. He asked an Ashes Kohen, wife of a Kohen who is nenas, so she has to be separated from her husband. Does she get her ksuba or does she not get her ksuba? What's the two sides? So if a woman is married to a Yisrael, she only is usher to her husband if she's mezana with intent, beratzon. In that case, of course, she doesn't get her ksuba. A woman who's married to a Kohen is also to her husband, even if she's nenas. Do we say that therefore it gets all the same halachos as a woman who's mezana against her husband if she's an Eshes Yisrael, beratzon, and therefore she loses her ksuba? Or do we say, no, this is a different case? She's nenas. So she's nenas, why should she lose her ksuba? So the Gemara says, and Papa said that we answered, and we had a proof from our Mishnah over here. And all the Mishnah says is, Tameani, I'm usher to you. It doesn't say what it's referring to. But we figured it out, because if it's referring to a Yisrael, then it has to be referring, in order for her to say that she's usher to him, she has to be saying that I was mizana baratzon. If that's the case, then the Mishnah wouldn't make sense to say that she has a ksuba. Obviously, then, it's referring to an Eshes Kohen, and it must be referring to Ba'onis, because again, baratzon, she wouldn't be able to say that she gets her ksuba. So you see clearly that an Eshes Kohen, who is nenas, still gets a ksuba, says so explicitly in this Mishnah.